Yay Networks.
Welcome to Greg Louganis is Alive, the podcast that challenges what you think you know. I'm your host, Greg Louganis, and yes, I'm still alive. I'm joined with my good friend and manager, Beth Zinman.
And hello, Greg. Happy you're alive as
Hello.
always.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. Yes. So we really didn't talk a whole lot this weekend. It was like a little bit of
I know.
message stuff back and forth. And
Well, you got a new kitty cat. And
I did, and I'm excited.
Yeah.
I
Oh
was
my
literally
God.
like, is the cat going to make a guest appearance?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Why not?
So far, kitty cat's a little quiet right now. Yeah, I'm so excited about that. It's so strange. I was always like, well, I had cats years and years and years ago when I was like first apartment as a teenager. And then got totally into dogs. I grew up with a dog when I was like a small child, and always proclaimed myself a dog person. Didn't understand the whole cat thing until I started taking care of strays. And as you know, unfortunately lost one of them like a month ago, and had this like hole in my heart because I'm like empty nesting mom since the summer. So yeah, I'm super excited about this cat. Oh my God, Greg, it's so cute.
Yeah. Oh, sweet.
Yeah. But anyway, so what's happening today?
Well, today we're talking about how to overcome pain on a path of self-discovery in our health journey and thrive in everyday life.
Oh my God.
Our guest has an amazing story. I mean, his own chronic pain and how he turned it into a path of helping others overcome the low points in their lives. And it really is. I mean, pain can be so invasive to a life.
Yeah, I know you've definitely gone through stuff. Well, a lot of people. Like, one of the things I think of when you say that is there are a lot of people out there that don't realize there's like, maybe holistic remedies or more resources than maybe what they're being so they can, conquer it and move on and actually like live a full life, So that's interesting. I think this is, going to be a really great episode. I also think about everything you've struggled with and the way that you find ways to keep going,
Yeah. I mean, in the thing that I love, and it's so funny. I just happened onto a podcast and talking about shoes, proper shoes and barefoot and getting grounded and all of this. So it really is kind of at the forefront of my mind, And so my guest today is Greg Stern. He's the CFO, Chief Foot Officer, and owner. I love that, right?
No, that's so clever. I was like, Chief Financial Officer, are you talking money?
No. Chief Foot Officer.
Cool.
Owner of From the Ground Up Physiotherapy. And after a serious ankle injury at age 19, Greg suffered from constant chronic pain that affected him physically and mentally. And it does. It really messes with your head.
Mm-hmm.
When surgery and rehabilitation professionals were unable to help pull him out of his dark place, he chose to dive deeper into the understanding of his own body and apply his expanding knowledge to slowly reconstruct his body and heal his physical and mental self. His goal is to help. Yeah, his goal is to help and see that injuries are not only a process of recovery, but also an opportunity to learn, to become curious, correct issues, and tap into potential you never knew you had. I think it's amazing, to have it. It's almost like a new lease on life.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking it sounds like the perfect guest for you. I feel like you guys can really get into it.
Yeah. So really looking forward to having a chat with him. So Greg, share your journey, because it really, as I was going through and reading about, your injury at age 19, and that, what happened, what was the driving force, obviously, to, get out of chronic pain. But what did you learn?
Lots of things.
Yeah.
We could definitely dive in. Yeah. So I actually just celebrated my 30th birthday. So that was 11 years ago now. So I basically, before this ankle sprain, I had injured myself so many times. I was very wild. Like, my parents would walk, and then they turn around like, "Where's Greg?" And I'd be like climbing a tree, and I'd break a bone, and I had stitches and teeth in my head once from someone I was always like getting injured.
Yeah.
But this was a very innocent ankle sprain, just playing football, that, you would think that after, 4 to 6 week timeline, the injury would heal as per all my other acute injuries that had happened. But unfortunately, this guy stuck around. And it was just, people classically sprain their ankles going outwards. They roll the ankle outwards. Mine actually, I jumped up and landed inwards. And so that's a less common sprain, but nonetheless, would still expect for healing to take place within a normal time frame. Mm-hmm. And I was playing quarterback for my flag football team. It was a very intense league in Montreal. It's actually the biggest flag football league in the world, is located in Montreal.
Wow.
Every week they take stats, and there's weekly articles and podcasts, and it was this super immersive league. And I continued to play because all I needed to do is catch and throw. I stopped playing defense, so I kept playing through the season, and we actually won the championship that year. But then after the season was over, it kept lingering on, this problem. And eventually, my father's a physician, an emergency doctor, and my mom is a physiotherapist herself. Wow. So I'm surrounded by medical professionals, and, we found a good physio for me, and I was going to see someone, and, they were doing all the classic therapy, the banded ankle exercises and working the hands on, and yet it wasn't getting better. And so after 2 months of being with that person, I went on to another person, and I just kept seeking out different professionals. Eventually, someone recommended I get into orthotics and then orthopedic shoes, but the problem stayed on and stayed on. And now we're getting, a year in. And basically, we'll call the pain non-excruciating, but a constant buzzing discomfort that was always there. Okay, so essentially, I'd be standing barefoot at a party or just barefoot at my house, and I'd just be like, zzz, there's that constant annoying pain. Yeah. That would obviously be exacerbated by activity, but even at baseline, it was just always there. Like, the moment I wake up, the moment I stand up, pounding again.
And the thing about that type of pain, it just makes you a little bit more apprehensive and not really living life.
Yeah, just always in the back of your
because
mind.
You're thinking, oh my God, what's when is the rug going to be pulled out, right?
Yeah. So eventually, having tried many different professionals, and just kind of enduring it and not knowing what to do, we started looking at different surgical options. Mm. And so I'm in Montreal, and I found my parents ended up linking up with a very high-end ankle specialist out of Toronto, and I got surgery 2.5 years after the initial injury. And that was like this big moment. I thought, like, okay, I'm getting surgery. There's so much like anticipation around this, because prior to that, I tried cortisone injections, like guided with ultrasound or whatever, and it didn't work. And I thought this would be like the moment. And I wake up and the pain is still there. And obviously, like, I would expect it, take a couple of weeks. But then after I start being able to walk again after the surgery, new pains. Hip pain and back pain that hadn't been there prior to the surgery. Right. And now I'm even in a lower state of mind, like I can't do anything of the things I wanted to do. And now, like, every time I can't sit comfortably, I can't walk, because obviously, like, I had compensated for so long that, these new pains emerged post-surgery that hadn't been there. And, having gone through all that different therapy and realizing, okay, like, I need to do something about this, because I was in a really bad state mentally, right? Yeah. Like, so now I hurt myself at 19. Mm-hmm. Now we're 22, 23 at this point. And like, I'm going through all of university, and like, in pain. I can't like train the way I used to. I played football, rugby. I did water skiing, snowboarding. Like any sport you name, I've been involved in my entire life. But now my body feels broken, unbalanced. I'm in constant pain, and I feel like I shouldn't be this way at such a young age.
Right.
But that was my reality.
Okay, so what was your darkest day? What would you say your darkest day was?
Well, essentially, I was on a cruise with my entire family. This was after my surgery, and I started like, not that I was a very I should say like I wasn't alcoholic of any sort, but I would just binge drink all the time at that point. Like it was like on the weekend I would, and again, you're just trying to, now I see so deeply addiction is like, all right, like, why are you just trying to, it's a soothing or a coping mechanism.
Right.
But I clearly was just like, I couldn't be myself anymore. And I just like would get blackout, and I got very drunk, like in front of my entire family, and did some stupid things and all that. And I just felt like, honestly, at that moment in time, I was just like contemplating ending things because I was very unhappy and in a very dark space.
Yeah.
And that was post-surgery. So that was like, even after I had, finally gotten the surgery and thought that things would be on the upturn, I was in a very dark space.
Yeah. I mean, it really is. I mean, it's so, debilitating. And also, cause I remember for me, it was when I lost my dad, we don't realize pain is pain. Pain is pain, whether it's physical pain or emotional pain. And oftentimes that's, there's a little bit of crossover. Because I went through in a period after my dad died. I inherited his morphine. He died of cancer. And so I commandeered his morphine, and I was just trying to deaden the pain. And it was emotional pain at that time. But I just realized that's all you're trying to do is to deaden the pain, because the pain can be so debilitating, and also with physical, the other thing, when I was 17, I had lower back issues. And so then I found somebody who treats more holistically. And so she was working with me on posture, and like what you do is, get a strong foundation. I mean, we start with our feet, we're on our feet so much. And so you got to have a strong foundation. So what steps did you take in order to strengthen? Because a lot of times it's about strengthening, right? Strengthening what's weak.
Yeah. So at that point in time, like I hit that low point, and eventually, I create, I guess all ups must hit a down first. And after that down, I decided that, I really need to take a deep dive and understand what was going on, because all these professionals were not helping me out.
Yeah.
At the time I wanted to go into medical school, and I just switched my whole focus on getting out of pain. And so I eventually decided, all right, screw medicine, I'm going to go into physical therapy. And eventually I got into to physio. I did a master's at McGill University in Montreal. Mm-hmm. But I was learning the exact same things in school that I was being treated with, which is basically site of pain equals site of problem, very isolated, obsession over little increments of anatomy, but not really looking at the whole picture of what's going on in someone's body. And so I started to do a lot of continuing education workshops and seminars, and looking around like on the internet. And fortunately, I landed on a podcast of people talking about like different types of footwear, and also this guy that was all about actually teaching a foot how to flatten. Most people hear the word flat and feet and they think that's a bad thing.
Right.
But our foot is a trampoline that is meant to go down and meant to go up. And if the foot doesn't move, I got a little foot here, so I can just demonstrate that. As you can see, when the knee comes forward, the foot flattens out. It widens and spreads to absorb impact. And then as I push through, it becomes like a rigid lever, a spring. Mm-hmm. But in order for us to be springy, we first need the spring to get loaded or lengthened. And so most people assume that a flat foot is a bad foot.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of many shoes don't actually allow our feet to flatten because we assume that's bad. And that's why I was in orthotics for all this time. And so just accumulating more and more knowledge from different mentors and starting to just get obsessed and like just spend hours like following things on YouTube and going down rabbit hole after rabbit hole and just trying things out from different sources than what I was being taught in school, different sources from what I was being given in my physical therapy sessions with osteos, with chiros. I went to everyone possible and no one was helping until I started finding these very smart mentors that were doing things outside the box.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually I started to make progress and I started being in less pain. And it was all about like, how does one stack their body? Very simply, like imagine you're about to start a race. You know, you bend your knee and you're about to, you lean forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
But oftentimes, like I'll get people in my clinic right now and I ask them, bend your front knee. And what happens to their body is that their head and their rib cage almost fall back and it's not, they don't go on top of the front leg. Or people get lunges in their back knee, or they get pain in their back knee when they perform lunges. It's because we don't know how to stack our body in a manner which brings our center of mass on top of the middle of the foot. And all of a sudden, the moment you learn how to do that, your foot kicks on, your calf kicks on, and the entire chain kicks on in this very cohesive manner. And then the leg is connected. And then you could start doing interesting things from there. Again, I didn't know about any of this because it's so basic as a concept. Learn to stack and organize your body on top of a foot.
Right.
But if you spend most of your physical therapy session lying on a table, well, that doesn't translate to getting up against gravity.
Right.
So it can feel great. You're going to get these short-term pain relief, and then you just go through this almost this high of chasing the pain. You get a relief for 3 days, and then you're back into the office again and again and again. And that's what was happening with me. And that's what happens with all the clients that come to see me is they've claimed to have tried everything, but everything, unfortunately, in the standard of our industry is now spend most of it on a session focusing on the site of pain rather than zooming out and understanding how all the parts are connected.
Right.
So once I understood how the parts are connected, that's when things got, interesting for me. And if we fast forward my journey, from being in chronic pain, now I go on hikes barefoot. I go slacklining. So I can walk between a tree, we'll say 40 feet. I have no problem. Every time I get on a slackline, I will cross that back and forth.
Yeah.
I go backwards as well. So I got really obsessed with how can I get my body organized in the best possible way? And I continue to learn today with lots of different implements and different toys and tools and philosophies. And now I have a whole system that's just come from a long journey of, forget about other people. I didn't care about other people. Initially, it was all about how do I get myself out of pain?
Right.
And along the way, of course, I learned some things. And now, I was medicine's not right for me. It's helping people, but more from in a biochemical way. And I want it to be just more in the physical sense.
Yeah. I mean, it's so interesting because, that's the reason why I started this podcast is to challenge what we think we know, and with the doctors and, orthopedic surgeons and all that, there's what they learned in medical school. And there's just that mentality. And it's not, and it is like what you said, they're focusing on the issue, the symptom and not really fully exploring the why. Why is this happening? Because that's when one thing is out of balance. And this is what I've kind of recognized in my own journey is oftentimes if I have a pain, I try and figure out, okay, what is the connector? What is the connecting posture, movement that potentially could be aggravating it, that is causing that acute pain in that specific area? Because oftentimes where the pain is not where the problem is, right?
100%.
So, and, I love that you start from the ground up, work on your feet and how you utilize your feet. And it's not, it's not what we think, because a lot of the shoe industry, it's about fashion and all that stuff. And it's not about, maintaining health and wellness.
Yeah, the shoes are a massive thing, to be honest. Like,
Yeah.
I was in, think about the older we get, the more orthopedic like our shoes are supposedly supposed to become, right? This idea of, the Nike grandpa shoe. Like, I was in that and I was suffering. But the thing is, most of the shoes that are in the industry are taper toe box shoes.
Mm-hmm.
So they basically, imagine your feet are supposed to be widest at the tips of the toes.
Right.
But instead, like, just imagine wrapping elastic band around, loosely wrapping a band. It will create the fingers to come together. It's the same thing with our toes.
Mm-hmm.
So your Asics, your New Balance, your Nikes, your Brooks, your whatever name of your company that you think is a good shoe, we need to reevaluate that for a sec. So the acronym I like to help people with is WTF, what the foot. Okay.
What the foot?
So W stands for widest at the tips of the toes. So again, I can just show a couple, different models. You'll just see that the idea that, like, our shoes are meant to look like the shape of our foot. It's very obvious that they should be that way. Just like gloves look like our hands. There are these Vibrams of the 5-finger-toed shoes that, like, people were the OG, like, shoe that people like, oh, those actually look like your feet. Now, the cool thing is there are a lot of new brands that exist that have a little bit of, have some fashion to them so that people don't have to wear those 5-fingered shoe, because I guess five-toe shoe, I guess we'll say.
Yeah.
But, most people aren't going to do that. Now, the other elements that were getting me into trouble were the elements of T and F. So we'll talk about T stands for thin. Now, our feet are a sensor, just like our eyes are a sensor. Mm-hmm. Now, when we go out into the sun, we don't wear blindfolds. We wear sunglasses. But when we wear 3 inches of cushioning between us and the ground with the Hokas and the Nike Air Max and the Adidas Boost and all these new companies that talk about, like, feels like I'm walking on a cloud, and they're espousing that to be a good thing. Well, what you're basically doing is you're blocking the nerve endings on your foot, which is there's so much rich information that our feet are supposed to give our brain to guide optimal movement. Now you're basically dumbing down that signal so it can barely feel. It's like turning the volume down on your feet. Or, like, imagine your vision was hazy. So what happens is our feet stop feeling the same way, and so they become very sensitive. So next time you go and walk on the beach and you hit a couple of rocks, you're like, you freak out because your feet are not desensitized to just normal sensations like walking on roots and rocks and moss and grass. Like, most people don't ever go barefoot unless they're going to beach once a year,
Right.
And so that element of being in these grandpa shoes actually destabilizes us. It's like walking on a pillow would, make me feel off balance. Now, the last element the last two, the F stands for flat and flexible. So flat is this idea that obviously when we were born, our heel and our toe are at the same height. Like, we're born with our feet flat on the ground. Now, why do women like to wear high-heeled shoes? Because it accentuates curves, pop, right? Booty, bust, everything looks more exaggerated. Mm-hmm. But obviously, if we look at what's happened to the back, it's going to be a more extreme lumbar curve. The low back, it goes into more extension. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, with 3 inches, most people are not walking around with a 3-inch heel. But again, if we come back to a classic runner, there's a 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, 1 inch maybe. And so what does that do to our body? It throws our entire body forward, and it's like, I'm going to fall over. So the body will start extending just gently, just a little bit, to prevent us from falling over. We're going to start bending our knees. We're going to make all sorts of compensations because our body is no longer aligned with gravity. So that obviously is just throwing us off from the get-go. Like, we're not in line. Mm-hmm. And then the final element is this idea of flexible. So every single shoe on the market should be able to do this. Yeah. For the listeners out there, I'm taking a shoe and I'm completely folding it into a ball. I've got a winter boot here. It's Montreal. We're approaching 0 degrees here. And so completely flexible in this sense. Mm-hmm. Okay. So why I mentioned that is that imagine you broke your arm and you were in a cast. Well, what would happen to your arm after 6 weeks of being in a cast? You wouldn't be able to bend yeah, it's going to be super, rigid, and there's going to be a lack of muscle there.
Mm-hmm.
So, what happens ultimately by being in these arch support, orthotics, is that we're basically preventing that foot from moving optimally. As I mentioned, this idea that the foot should flatten and widen. And so our feet become weak. They become stiff. Your muscles don't go through their full range of motion. So all of a sudden, your foot starts moving like a block instead of articulating with the ground and interfacing in a very, natural, fluid way. And
Mm-hmm.
once I started to go away from traditional running shoes, more into natural footwear, and then looking at these different exercises that facilitated that transition, I started to make really interesting progress. But it's not just, sometimes like it is, of course, you want to be in the new shoe that permits your foot to be in an environment that allows it to function optimally, but helping yourself to transition along the way is important, because you can't just take your block foot and put it into like a very loose shoe and all of a sudden expect things to just magically get better. Yes, it will get better over time, but you could optimize that transition with some different exercises.
Yeah, I loved what your suggestion recommendation. Walk on a beach barefoot. It's just like you can feel the articulation in your feet, and the way the foot is naturally supposed to function. And I love the example that you said. If you put your arm in a cast, it's like we're putting our feet in a cast.
100%.
And you're not allowing those muscles to articulate and build strength.
We hear the word good shoe and we think more technology.
Yeah.
But, our feet have all the technology that they need inside them to support us.
Mm-hmm.
But immediately you go to any sort of doctor or professional, it's like, look, if you came to me with a neck problem and I give you a neck brace, you're like, how am I going to get better? But
Right.
for whatever reason, the logic that we apply to our feet is like completely distorted, and we become like specialized. And like, again, I don't believe podiatrists are bad people, but you
Mm-hmm.
train smart people in a faulty ideology or approach, then all we're doing is compounding this, quick fix solution. Head over to Dr. Scholl's or whatever, and like get your feet fixed. What we're not realizing, we're not fixing our feet. We're just kicking it down the line, and ultimately, like, orthotics could be a tool, but they're not a solution to a problem. So just like you would hurt yourself, if you hurt yourself, like offloading a structure temporarily can make sense,
Right.
but it's not going to be the long-term, game plan to ultimately have the highest functioning body possible.
Right. Exactly. So you can get the support. Sometimes we need that support to get better, but then you want to get rid of that.
Very briefly get better, but like in the intermediate, you need to be starting to work on getting the part stronger and moving better.
Yeah. So building that strength so it is, more functional, because that's one thing I've noticed. Like if I have oftentimes an issue with my foot, then it affects my lower back, or it affects other parts of our bodies that we kind of disassociate with the potential that, it could be our feet, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, like everything for me, like with my clients, is basically, as I described before, this idea of the stack,
Mm-hmm.
getting myself to have a bent knee and bringing my belly, my chest, and my face forward all together with a back like very light.
Mm-hmm.
And now all of a sudden, like the calf is engaged and like the body's interested because you're like in this mid stance position of a runner.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll get someone to rotate or side bend or learn how to bend down, but it comes from the stacked position. And every time people are like, oh, my feet are lighting up right now. There's 19 muscles that connect into our foot, 33 joints, 26 bones. Is this, again, high technology area with lots of sensory information. Like, why do people kick their shoes off when they get on an airplane? Because intuitively they know, let my feet feel, let them breathe,
Right.
But oftentimes we live our life and like we assume that our feet are supposed to be tired at the end of the day or achy or weak. Like the cool thing is, again, there's all these sort of brands. Like I had my wedding last year, and I wear a minimalist brand of shoes that got away. My wife permitted it because basically it looked like the shoe has a high heel look, but it's a faux heel. It's a fake heel. So I'm actually still flat on the ground, and then it's still looking like a pointy shoe, but where it's made to be longer, so that my toes land at the very widest part, and I don't feel like my toes are crammed together. And no one said a word. They looked like stylish enough. And now when I've had I'm at the age where now I've had like 20 weddings in the last 2 years. I'm dancing the night away with zero pain in my body. Whereas people like at the end of the night, like people are like looking wrecked because, they're just not used to it and their feet kill from being in like these, the stylish shoe. So I'm just saying there's options available for the casual wear, the more athletic, just want to train, hiking boots, like all these are available. And there's a lot of brands I can mention afterwards that people need to look this out, because 99% of people on the planet are wearing the wrong shoe. And unless you're actually like more in a rural village and you're just not wearing shoes, because ultimately that is the optimal environment. But, naturally in a urban environment, you can't necessarily wear no shoes. So right. We just want a shoe that protects our foot, but does not impose on our foot.
Yeah, because I just got a pair of Vivo Barefoot.
Yeah,
and so those have been great, and they kind of look like clown shoes, right?
What I think about that is like people think initially, oh my God, like everyone's looking at my foot like I have a clown shoe.
Yeah.
But then immediately, like 2 weeks later, you start looking at everyone and realizing that everyone's got a triangle shoe. So I lost my ego long ago when I realized that I'm in pain. I don't care what the hell is on my foot, because I was already wearing grandpa shoes that didn't look great either, right? And they were weakening my feet. So now, look, it's a little black pair. Like, to me, this looks decently inconspicuous. You find a black pair, not the biggest deal. And I rather my feet feel great and feel strong and flexible and springy every single day rather than being in chronic pain. So there's that. And I guess the last point to make about this is the dose makes the poison. So if you want to go out and have dinner with your friends or whatever, wear whatever the hell shoe you want. Like, that doesn't make a difference to me. It's the shoe that you spend 90% of your time in, whether being at work or, training or walking in your neighborhood. That's where obviously you need to prioritize a shoe that is wide, that's flat, that's flexible. I guess I kindly said I'll get over it.
Right. I mean, it's, fashion, what it looks like over, health and wellness.
Yeah.
It really is about, health and wellness, and, like I was saying, I mean, chronic pain is so debilitating, and to get to the root cause of that. And I love that you work from the ground up. Right. Because that's our, that's our base. That's our strength. That's where our strength should come from.
Well, you would never build a building on a faulty foundation, right? But we just think of our feet like a piece of meat that goes inside of our shoes, and we forget about them until the end of the day. And we only start really paying attention to them when we have problems. So yeah, it's definitely an important idea that we should be barefoot at our house, and there should be no problem with that. But so many people, again, it all depends on the culture, right? Some people will only be barefoot, and some people like wearing shoes in their house. And so, and the doctor says wear your shoes at all time, or the podiatrist says that. It's like, that doesn't seem to coincide with how, we evolved to rely and assume that we're faulty unless supported. Mm-hmm. So it's just important, as the whole theme of your show is to question what we've been told and recognize that maybe there's a better way.
Yeah. I mean, I'm Polynesian, so I'm Samoan. So a lot of that culture, it's like, you're barefoot, and and that's the thing, you're building that strength, building that foundation. Whereas with a lot of the footwear that is, that most people are wearing, it really is, it's not helping. I love that you talked about the cast, because then, you get the supposed support, but then the atrophy, you're not building the strength to have a solid, strong foundation.
Well, as I mentioned, like at the one of the things that's even, so people will say like, well, I have flat feet and I've been told I have flat feet. And people say that as if that's a diagnosis, as if that's a bad thing. Like people from African descent, it's like flat feet, LeBron James, Usain Bolt. Flat feet are actually an advantage when it comes to speed, because the foot can deform faster to the ground and get off quicker. Now, what I care more about is, does your foot change shape? So if you have a high arch foot or a more flat foot, does your foot have the ability to flatten out and re-arch a little bit to some degree? Because my feet are flatter, but they help. When I learned to flatten my flatter feet, they got better. So it's like, again, it's just this idea that when I teach people to flatten out their foot, I always will film it, because like the first reaction is, they walk away for a few seconds and they're like, whoa. And I'm like, what? And I already know, because I've done this exercise to like 1,000 people before. And they'll be like, my feet feel lighter. My feet feel like different. I feel the ground more. And so so wait a minute. If you feel the ground more, a lot of people have been walking on the outsides of their feet their whole life, because they're almost either consciously or unconsciously avoiding loading the arch. But the moment that they find that inside of the foot, all of a sudden, like they're connected to this idea for the first time, and it makes a huge, huge difference. So people who deal with chronic tight calves and they just keep stretching them out, oftentimes it's just a matter of learning how to do a classic calf stretch in a way that deforms the foot down to the ground. Again, the subtleties in the details of how we coach it, and I have YouTube videos and people can check that out or whatever. But the idea is that when you do it properly, all of a sudden your calf opens up, the foot opens up, and then all of a sudden you feel more springy on your feet.
So you mentioned that you had some. Do you have some favorite brands of shoes that?
Yeah, so I think a great place for a lot of people to start is the brand Ultra. It's based out of the US in Utah. Why I like them for a lot of people is they're wide, they're flat, and they're flexible, but they do have some cushioning. So for someone who's been in a Hoka, to go to a Vivo Barefoot, which is basically this shoe, which is like no sole whatsoever, can be extreme for a lot of people. I also don't really recommend people run on concrete or asphalt with Vivos. The Ultra brand is better. Like personally, if I go running, I'm going to be running in a trail, so I like being in thinner shoes. But the Ultra brand is an amazing brand for a lot of people, because it does have that cushioning that eases the transition. So they start to strengthen, but they're just not, they don't have that literally connected to the sole. But then over time, I do recommend people going towards that with Vivo Barefoot, a company called Zero Shoes with an XERO. There's Lems, there's Field Grounds, there's Groundies, there's B-Length. There's like literally infinite number of brands. I can provide a list for if you want to like include on the show notes, or just even
that'd be great.
typing a natural footwear.
Yeah, so that people can check that out and
And I do think there's actually good looking shoes. Again, all the biggest difference is that you just have a little bit more space in your toes.
Right.
So if you're going to call yourself a clown because of that, it's like, well, people are like, whoa, when I get them in one of their shoes, like I have like brands here just to get people to, feel it when they're at my clinic, and they're like, oh, my toes are squished together. Yeah. Or they say like, it feels like I'm floating in my shoe. I'm like, no, and I go and I make sure that they're in a good size shoe. It's like, no, you're just not used to having freedom in your toes for the first time. So you equate ability to wiggle your toes as like floating, because your brain neuro associates a shoe equals, toe box must be compressed completely.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I started off as a dancer. So, the dance shoes are not real great. They kind of scrunch your toes together. And, I remember my tap shoes, and, and so I have a bunion, I have bunions, and so it's like the toes weren't able to function the way that they're supposed to function and build that strength. So there's a lot of, whether it's vanity, fashion, whatever, but for the health and wellness. Now, when did you know that you were on the right path?
Yeah, I guess it was just, the pain started to slowly disappear as I started to do more and more things, and the back pain and the hip pain were disappearing with time. So I guess that was only in like 2019-ish so I guess from 2013 to 2019, I was dealing with pain for like 6 years. But I knew I was onto something because like it was starting to get better. But I guess it was definitely a slow go. It wasn't as immediate. Like if I had myself now to coach myself back then, I would have, made way faster progress. And like I get people really quick results because, again, I'm challenging their nervous system upright against gravity. That's the key thing, not just like table work and whatever. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, as I mentioned, it's just like, if we don't work on our movement patterns, you haven't done physical therapy, in my opinion.
Right. There's got to be a change. There's got to be, a period of rebuilding, of growth, to gain that strength and flexibility and all that stuff. So how do we stay in touch with you? What you're doing and how following you in your progress and all that you're doing?
Yeah, of course. So everywhere you could find me is Ground Up Physio. So the word ground up and then physio is PHYSIO. Mm-hmm. So Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, all that jazz. I have a lot of free content out there that people could go and follow. I also do have a guided mobility and strength program for those that, who've claimed to have tried everything and, don't have one-on-one access to me, although I do virtual. So if someone wanted one-on-one contact with me, I have people that I'm working with around the world. But this is basically a program called Rebuild Your Body from the Ground Up that's designed to be done in, 15 minutes per day for easy or more advanced, people that have, competence with their body. But I'm going to guide them along the way with the exact same system that I use with my one-on-one clients to get people out of pain that they can follow in their home with like basically no equipment. So, I think that would be a great place. And of course, they could find those links in, either your show notes or just going to Instagram, and the link in the bio will have all that access.
Terrific.
Well, I'm going to be in San Diego in December, but I guess I don't know where you're located.
I'm originally from San Diego. I was born in San Diego and raised. Is it a conference that you're coming to, or?
Yeah. So essentially, the guy who created the Bosu ball, that half dome ball,
right?
He's also created something called rope flow, which I could give you a quick demo so you could see. This is probably the coolest thing I do now. So this is rope flow.
Okay.
It's essentially a practice. So why am I going to San Diego? Because I've learned from this guy. It's a practice. Comes back to the basics of a figure 8 pattern.
Right.
So you see how I'm shifting my weight side to side.
Mm-hmm.
So I was giving classes all summer to people. So you see how I'm going to shift side to side. It connects my hands into this like coiling core. So all about balance and coordination comes from this ability to get my head on top of my body stacked in this way. So sometimes when people are working on balance, they do it with their knee bent and they're like doing it like this, but that doesn't really make sense. We actually want to stack our body in an organized way where we allow side bending and rotation to take place. Because so many times when people are doing core exercises, they're like, core tight, squeeze your bum, squeeze, but they don't. Yeah. So the whole idea is creating fluidity in your body. And that practice does that. So I'm going to be in San Diego the second time. Actually, I was there last year.
When December?
December like 8 to 10.
So
but
early
I'm probably
December.
whatever.
Yeah. Downtown Convention Center?
No. It's at this. It's called WEC Method. So the guy named David WEC is the creator of the Bosu ball.
Okay.
He's also the creator of this rope flow, and he's made a bunch of other tools and toys and different modalities that provide feedback. So the rope is one tool. There's other like clubs and pulsers and all sorts of interesting modalities that he uses to give people feedback. And like he's really kind of up the fitness industry in a very unique way, because so many people are all about the squeezing and this very like rigid
Right.
way of training,
Right.
and that's what most people do and they assume is right.
Yeah.
And like I'm working with a personal trainer who's been in the industry for 30 years and her body's like completely destroyed. So
Yeah.
oftentimes the people that are promoting certain things the most are actually the most messed up.
Damaging.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Cause like when I started in acrobatics in dance, a lot of, cause I had a partner, and a lot of that is figuring out, balance wise, foundation to keep her safe, to keep me safe,
yeah,
and doing all these little, these crazy things. So yeah, I mean, I totally get it.
yeah. You should definitely.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I love it because it's, it's all of that, it's dynamic movement of rotation and all that. So it just brings awareness to, okay,
Yeah.
where is my body? If it, cause
I
if you,
showed this to like I had classes of 15 people in Montreal, and they're anywhere from like 30 to 70. So like I've shown this to 70-year-olds and 80-year-olds,
oh,
and all of a sudden they feel more balanced. Again, it's all about that rhythm and
right.
movement there, so of the spine.
And especially for elders, because, that is the biggest issue is balance,
Yeah,
you know? And
yeah,
so, yeah, start losing your balance. Yeah, to have something like that to challenge you to build that strength and awareness,
hmm
to be able to function, and it's a health span rather than lifespan. Just
yep,
focusing on your
yep.
health, wellness, vitality, all of that stuff. That's awesome. That's great. Love the work that you're doing. Thank you for coming on today and having a chat with me, because it is. I mean, it's your feet are important.
Amen.
Yeah, and
And it translates to everything upstream, right? Like that is the reality. Like you could have issues in your neck. Like just imagine like one foot is different. It's
right,
going to impact the whole way that we conduct our body in space. And so just learning to access your feet in new ways like opens up the potential for your body. And so like if you're how is this relevant to me? I'm dealing with this. It's like, well, one, do you want a higher functioning body with more horsepower, like
right,
get springy again? Like the athleticism and the way that we used to feel as kids comes from the fact that we were just able to jump up and down in this nice springy way in our feet. Whereas now we go to, like, let's say you go to a gym and you do plyometric drills like box jumps. People tell you to land softly. That's actually not the right advice. When we run, we don't want to lose height with every step we take, because then we're absorbing with our muscles.
mm,
We're meant to be absorbing with our tendons. We're meant to be elastic. And so the way that we load through the feet has a massive impact on the way that we're going to like show up in our sports and everyday life. So it's super, super important, obviously.
yeah,
And I help people deal with hip issues, obviously, and shoulder issues. Not always going to go back to the feet. Like I'll give specific love to a certain area, but then of course, like things do ultimately come back to the feet eventually.
yeah. I mean that's so awesome. Greg, thank you for joining me today. This has been great. To kind of address that, and yeah, I mean, I'm on this path of pain isn't normal. Pain is telling you that there is something off. And getting to the root cause and starting from your foundation is wonderful. So I love the work that you're doing. But thank you so much for
Thank you
joining
very
me
much.
today. I've really enjoyed that.
Thanks for
Very,
having me.
very
Appreciate
helpful, very information, a lot of really good information. So
it. Awesome.
we'll be back right after this little break.
Wow. I actually just learned a whole lot. I
Right?
feel a lot smarter by a man who is roughly about half both of our ages.
I know, right?
Um,
Oh my God.
yes. And it was amazing, to be honest.
Mm.
I've had like my own foot issues because a lot of my work life in my earlier years was on my feet 12, 14, 16 hours, a day in heels, in, whatever, like in whatever shoe looked good, because that was my job to look good, you know?
Right.
And then to hear what he said about, just like getting, back to nature, as far as your body has the tools built in, to support you.
Yeah.
And just, getting into a shoe that's, designed to kind of let your body do what it's meant to do.
Yeah.
So,
And
yeah.
build that strength, you know,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Cause
to
like the orthotic thing with like, it's kind of, if you're not
function.
using it, you're losing it. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. This goes back to, why I wanted to start this podcast is challenging what we think we know.
Yeah.
We think we knew certain things about footwear, and that you
Yeah.
need support, you need this, you need orthotics, you need, where that actually is oftentimes doing more harm than good. That
Yeah.
we're not allowing our feet to function the way that they were designed
My
to
mind
function.
is blown, Greg, because
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
I know if my feet don't feel right, then the back hurts, and then
right.
this hurts and that hurts, or the hip or
Yeah,
whatever it is.
yeah,
I'm on the precipice of being 55, so it's not like I'm ancient,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know?
And and I'm so glad he was shared his journey so
Yeah.
authentically. Pain can be incredibly debilitating. Chronic pain can really affect who we are.
Yeah,
You
that was
know,
very, very inspiring.
yeah,
I do want to reiterate something he mentioned,
yeah,
which was WTF. We
yeah,
know as what the beep.
yeah,
Yeah. But
yeah.
he said, look at it, from WTF, which was walk, right? So like walk on the beach and you're like
Mhm.
barefoot and feeling, the ground and letting your
Yeah.
foot do what it's meant to. And then going for a shoe that's thin, is the
Mhm.
T. Which is great. Again, the goal being like letting your foot do what it's meant to do without all that rigidity,
Right.
under it, or all that cushion. And
Yeah.
then what else did he say? Oh my, the F was for flexible, picking a shoe that's really flexible. And again, what you just said about starting the podcast to challenge what you think you
Mhm.
know. It's
Yeah.
like, who would have thought without hearing him that
Right.
a really flexible shoe that you can fold in half is actually a good thing? So yeah, super cool. I'm
Yeah.
so glad you did this.
Yeah. And also, think of all the surgeries potentially that could have been
Mm,
avoided. If we take care of our feet and strengthen those muscles, and because that's where it starts from. That's your base. And then
right.
it
For
goes,
good mechanics. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it was awesome.
Very
So
awesome.
thank you for joining us today on this episode of Greg Louganis is Alive. And please subscribe and share this episode with the people that you love. And until next time, namaste.
Yay Networks.